The smell of rotting flesh was so overwhelming that even seasoned courtiers, men who had seen executions and battlefields, vomited in the royal presence. Dogs crept into the chapel at night to lick at the fluids leaking from the king's coffin. This is the real story of how the once golden Prince of England, Henry VIII, became a 400-pound monster, both in body and in mind. And tonight, on Tales of Pain, you'll discover the shocking medical evidence that proves this transformation. Evidence that Tudor historians tried to bury for centuries. Records hidden in court physicians' private notes, forensic examination of the king's remains, and secret diaries reveal the truth about Henry's gruesome final years. But to understand how it all began, we must go back to the tilt yard, back to the moment where a single accident set in motion the slow, rotting death of England's most powerful king. Stay with me until the end because you're about to hear details of Henry's final hours that no history class ever told you. And trust me, they will haunt you. The setup. Build up, January 24th, 1536. Greenwich Palace. Henry VIII, 44 years old, still relatively fit, still projecting the image of the dazzling Renaissance prince. The tilt yard was alive with the thunder of hooves. Crowds craned their necks to see their king on his massive war horse, lance in hand, glinting armor worth more than a lifetime's wages for a commoner. Picture it, two armored titans racing toward each other at breakneck speed, the ground trembling beneath them. Then, catastrophe. A collision with the force of a modern car crash. Henry's war horse stumbles. His 300 pounds of man and metal slam into the frozen earth. The massive destrier falls on top of him, crushing the king beneath. Silence. Courtiers frozen. Anne Boleyn, pregnant with what she desperately hoped would be a son, waiting in agony for news. For 2 hours, England effectively had no king. When Henry finally awoke, witnesses noticed something different. His eyes, once bright, clever, and charming, now held a darker light. He didn't express relief or gratitude. Instead, he erupted into rage, demanding to know why the tournament had been stopped. That moment marked the end of the charming Renaissance prince. In his place emerged a paranoid tyrant with violent mood swings, who would terrorize England for the next 11 years. Modern neuroscientists now believe Henry suffered a traumatic brain injury to the frontal lobe, the very region controlling personality, impulse control, and judgment. The downward spiral. Before the accident, Henry was comparatively restrained for a monarch of his era, married to Catherine of Aragon for 20 years. Fewer executions than his predecessors, measured decisions. After January 1536, the executions began. Anne Boleyn beheaded just 4 months later. Trusted advisor Thomas Cromwell soon after. Henry's moods became unpredictable. Servants described him weeping uncontrollably one moment, then screaming for blood the next. But the brain injury was only the beginning. The same accident that scrambled his mind also reopened an old wound on his leg, a wound that would never heal. And this is where Henry's story turns from tragedy into pure body horror. Body horror / medical details. Years before, Henry had suffered a leg injury, probably from another joust. It healed with only a scar, but the 1536 accident tore it open again. In a Tudor England without antibiotics or germ theory, an open wound was a slow-motion death sentence. For 11 years, Henry lived with ulcers the size of tennis balls on his legs, constantly weeping pus. So painful that even the brush of bedsheets made him scream. Dr. Thomas Vicary's secret notes, hidden in the Royal College of Physicians until the 1960s, describe ulcers of a grievous nature, stinking and painful beyond measure. The king's legs had to be drained daily, sometimes twice a day, filling bronze bowls with infected fluid. Servants would rush the bowls away before the smell could overtake the room. Henry tried everything to hide it. He invented special lead-weighted bandages to compress the wounds, which only cut off circulation and made the infection worse. He drowned himself in perfumes from Arabia. He commanded painters to depict him with impossibly athletic legs. But the infection was not just in his legs anymore. It was in his blood. Modern doctors believe Henry developed chronic osteomyelitis, a bone infection releasing toxins into his body every single day. Imagine the worst pain you've ever felt: a toothache, a migraine. Now imagine it in your legs, unending for over a decade. The fever, the chills, the swelling appetite, and then nausea. And worst of all, the neurological effects of the toxins crossing into his brain, intensifying his paranoia and rage. Public facade versus private decay. By 1540, Henry's physical decline accelerated. He ballooned from 280 pounds to over 350. His armor's waist size grew from 48 inches to 54 inches, larger than most refrigerators today. Palaces had to be modified to accommodate him. Doorways widened, floors reinforced, special chairs built. He was dressed lying in bed, lifted upright by pulleys into a wheeled chair, hidden from the public eye. Meanwhile, his mind slipped further. By 1544, courtiers whispered that the king was no longer merely bad-tempered, but genuinely mad. He held conversations with people who weren't there. He argued with ghosts, his father, his victims, even Anne Boleyn's spirit. He grew obsessed with death. His final portrait originally showed him holding a staff topped with a human skull, later painted over by his son Edward. But the X-rays don't lie. The final years, horror crescendo. By Christmas 1546, Henry was barely recognizable as human. Swollen face, yellowed eyes, fluid retention distorting his features. The smell, despite pounds of perfume and incense, became unbearable. Ladies of the court excused themselves to vomit after mandatory appearances. Men held pomanders to their noses. His ulcers turned green, then brown, the smell described as the stench of death itself. His paranoia reached new heights, ordering executions of people he'd already killed. At a banquet, he screamed at an empty chair, "I took your head once, I'll take it again." His death, January 1547. Henry enters his final decline. Dr. Thomas Wendy's suppressed notes describe wounds so deep that bone was visible, the flesh black, gangrene spreading, his kidneys shutting down, his tongue swollen, his breath smelling of rotting meat. He begged his physicians to save him, promising them riches, then raging at them when they failed. In delirium, he called out for his mother, his brother Arthur, even his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, asking forgiveness. On January 27th, Henry suffered a massive stroke. His speech became incomprehensible. He attempted to sign a death warrant for the Duke of Norfolk, but could only produce an ink blot. At 2:07 a.m., January 28th, 1547, King Henry VIII was dead. But the horror was just beginning. The corpse. Henry's body decomposed at terrifying speed. The infection that had consumed him in life accelerated in death. His body swelled as gases built inside. The smell worsened. Servants fainted. The Privy Council kept his death secret for 3 days, trying to figure out how to handle the corpse. The embalmers discovered his liver fell apart at a touch, his intestines black with gangrene. They packed him with over 100 pounds of salt and herbs, sealed him in a massive lead coffin, yet even that couldn't contain him. On the journey to Windsor, the coffin split at Sion Abbey. Putrid fluids leaked onto the chapel floor. By morning, dogs had entered and licked the king's remains. The man who broke from Rome to claim divine authority ended up as food for scavenging dogs. He was buried quickly, the full ceremony abandoned. Witnesses silenced under threat of death. The official story: Henry died peacefully and was buried with honor. The truth: The Golden Prince ended as a 400-pound mass of infection, rotting from within, screaming in terror, his body literally bursting after death. If this hidden history shook you, you'll want to see my next investigation. I'm uncovering the real reason Anne Boleyn was executed, and it's not what you learned in school. There's a French spy connection that changes everything about the Tudor dynasty. Hit subscribe, click the bell icon, and join me as I reveal the suppressed truths history tried to bury. This has been Tales of Pain, and this is the shocking death of Henry VIII.